Very little is left of the ancient North American monuments. More than 90% of the structures that were documented are now completely gone.
I explored the Olmec mystery in considerable depth.
Scientists were stunned when they found the ruins of an ancient city hidden under the dense Amazon rainforest. Based on what we know, an advanced civilization like this should not have existed there thousands of years ago. The remains included huge pyramids, finely carved stone monuments, and artifacts showing that people understood complicated subjects like astronomy. How could a society develop and flourish in such an isolated, difficult environment? Where did their advanced knowledge and skills come from? Join us as we explore this shocking scientific discovery of an ancient civilization in the Amazon jungle that shouldn't exist. The ancient Olmec and their colossal stone heads. Graham chuckled to himself as he pictured the looks on the 19th century archaeologists' faces when they first laid eyes on the massive stone heads. It's hard to imagine what it's like stumbling across something like that in the dense jungles of Mexico. Tall sculptures over 9 feet tall, weighing tons, with distinctly non-European facial features like flat noses and fleshy cheeks, and the giant carved helmets. Nobody's ever found a real helmet like that in any ancient culture. Those early explorers had no idea what they were looking at. They knew these heads were incredibly old, predating the more familiar Maya and Aztec civilizations. But they didn't realize they had discovered the first major civilization of ancient Mesoamerica, the Olmec. For decades, the huge heads were just weird anomalies, sometimes misattributed to other cultures. But eventually, more systematic digs in the Olmec heartlands began uncovering dozens of these massive sculptures, along with other telltale artifacts. Finally, archaeologists put the pieces together and recognized the Olmec as a distinct and hugely influential civilization. The Olmec flourished in the Mexican Gulf Coast regions like Veracruz and Tabasco from around 1500 to 400 BCE. They were the first Mesoamerican culture to develop a stratified society with elite rulers, priests, artisans, and traders. Their influence stretched across much of eastern Mexico through a trade network centered around prized resources like jade, rubber, and magnetite. Perhaps their most iconic legacy was those colossal carved heads, thought to depict their rulers or other high-ranking figures. But the Olmec also pioneered other quintessential Mesoamerican traditions like pyramid construction, hieroglyphic writing, the ritual ball game, and even the first major cities planned with ceremonial centers. In many ways, the Olmec laid the foundation that later civilizations like the Maya built upon and expanded upon. Their achievements showed an advanced understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering for their time. This level of sophistication led some modern theorists like Graham Hancock to wonder, did the Olmec civilization emerge suddenly as an isolated, brilliant anomaly? Or did they inherit advanced knowledge from an even older mother culture, now lost to history? During the late 19th century, the ancient cultures of Mexico and Central America started captivating scholars, explorers, and the public's imagination. The Victorian era was brimming with curiosity about these mysterious lost civilizations and their crumbling ruins swallowed by jungles. People were fascinated by the tantalizing glimpses of a grand bygone world. This spirit of discovery fueled a boom in expeditions and archaeological digs. Museums, universities, and private patrons began funding quests, not just to collect artifacts, but to seriously study the history and culture of indigenous American peoples. It marked archaeology's evolution from a treasure hunt into a systematic academic discipline. Two pioneering figures during this era were John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood. In the 1840s, their famous expeditions through Mexico and Central America introduced the splendors of the ancient Maya civilization to the Western world. Their vivid illustrations and written accounts sparked widespread public interest. These early expeditions were a critical first step, but were also hampered by biases and misunderstandings. For example, many extraordinary Olmec artifacts were wrongly assigned to the Maya or Aztecs because so little was known about the Olmec at first. Their distinctive sculptural style wasn't immediately recognized as belonging to a whole separate civilization. But gradually, more focused digs started revealing the Olmec puzzle pieces. In 1862, José Melgar Serrano uncovered one of the first recognized Olmec colossal heads at Tres Zapotes, although he incorrectly interpreted the Ethiopian facial features through the racial lens of that era. The real breakthrough came in the 1940s, when the renowned archaeologist Matthew Stirling led a major Smithsonian expedition to the ancient Olmec capital of San Lorenzo. Stirling's detailed excavations and mapping, coupled with emerging radiocarbon dating techniques, allowed the team to accurately trace San Lorenzo's history back to around 1200 to 900 BCE. Suddenly, this mysterious metropolis littered with huge sculptures started painting a coherent picture. San Lorenzo was unquestionably the oldest major city ever discovered in the Mesoamerican region, predating other advanced civilizations like the Maya by over a millennium. It forced archaeologists to reckon with the Olmec as the wellspring from which later people sprang. As Graham put it, this was the first glimpse of the mother culture underlying all the familiar Mesoamerican achievements in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and urban planning. The artifacts from San Lorenzo showed the Olmec possessed sophisticated knowledge that was once thought impossible for their era, whether inherited from an even earlier lost civilization or not. Over the following decades, other prolific Olmec sites like La Venta and Tres Zapotes were systematically excavated, solidifying the picture of a highly advanced and artistically developed prehistoric society. Olmec influences could be traced spreading across much of eastern Mexico, impacting all later civilizations. The old biases were shattered. The Olmec were recognized as the first unmistakable mother culture of Mesoamerica. Like the complex calendars tracking celestial cycles and huge stone sculptures, the forgotten Olmec civilization achieved staggering feats unimaginable for their era. Let's dive into their remarkable legacy before it slips away. The grand accomplishments of the Olmec civilization. So what exactly did the Olmec culture manage to achieve during their time as the preeminent power of ancient Mesoamerica? A lot more than you might think for a Stone Age civilization flourishing over 3,000 years ago. For starters, they were the first in their region to develop a stratified society with full-time specialists like priests, scribes, artisans, and traders, rather than just generalized hunter-gatherers. There's clear evidence of elite social classes, permanent urban centers with monumental architecture like pyramids and stone monuments, and organized agriculture. Many archaeologists consider San Lorenzo the first true city or state in Mesoamerica. The Olmec were pioneers of things we associate with much later cultures like advanced mathematics, a complex calendrical system, and the ritual ball game played on stone courts. They had a hieroglyphic writing system that scholars are still working to decipher, and they seemed to possess deep astronomical knowledge, orienting their pyramids and monuments with the precise movements of celestial bodies. Their crowning achievement may have been their utterly massive stone carvings and sculptures, like the iconic colossal heads and huge boulder relief carvings. Not just marvels of artistic expression, but stunning feats of ancient engineering and transportation to move multi-ton blocks of basalt, sometimes up to 80 miles from the quarries, with no metal tools or wheels. La Venta in particular contains a remarkable assortment of gigantic Olmec sculptures and architecture clustered into an apparent ceremonial complex and elite residential zone. Like San Lorenzo before it, the sheer scale and sophistication of La Venta's urban planning and construction staggers the imagination for its era around 900 to 400 BCE. The Great Pyramid alone spreads out to over 100 feet high in a unique conical earth and clay construction. aligned precisely to the movements of Venus and other celestial bodies. It showcases Olmec's advanced understanding of astronomy, as well as the organizational capabilities to mobilize huge amounts of labor and materials into a single cohesive vision. Artifacts like finely carved jade figurines, mosaic pavements, and buried elite tombs provide further glimpses into the Olmec's rich culture and stratified societal hierarchy. Their wide-ranging trade network brought goods and materials like magnetite across eastern Mexico. Perhaps most remarkably, it appears the Olmec developed their advanced civilization and knowledge independently, without any external influences. Looking at the totality of the archaeological evidence, it becomes clear that Olmec created the template for all succeeding Mesoamerican civilizations in religion, astronomy, mathematics, construction, urban planning, and more. Their accomplishments defy conventional understandings of how rapidly ancient peoples could progress. It comes as no surprise that maverick theorists like Graham Hancock speculate that the Olmec may have inherited some high wisdom from an even more ancient civilization that no longer exists. As a blazing torch passed from hand to hand, the profound wisdom of the Olmec mirrored through every successive Mesoamerican culture. Keep watching to discover how this mother civilization's DNA seeped into the newer civilizations of the Maya and Aztecs. The influence of Olmec civilization on the following cultures. Perhaps the biggest significance and lasting legacy of the Olmec civilization was the profound impact and influence they exerted on every major Mesoamerican culture that followed, most notably the Maya and Aztecs. When you line up the archaeological evidence side by side, it becomes glaringly obvious these later peoples directly inherited and built upon the fundamental blueprints of Olmec society, down to the core concepts and symbolism. Often in such a literal way, it almost appears they were taught or initiated into Olmec wisdom from the source. Take their cosmological and astronomical knowledge, for example. The foundational counting and calendar systems used by civilizations like the Maya show obvious continuity from Olmec origins. The Maya long count calendar, which amazed scholars with its cyclical timekeeping accuracy over thousands of years, was essentially an inherited version of the Olmec's sophisticated astronomical calendar. Even the famous Mayan fascination with tracking the intricate motions of Venus was clearly inherited from the Olmec. The Great Pyramid at La Venta was oriented with precision toward the path of Venus across the night sky, indicating that the Olmec viewed this planet with special reverence too. The Maya would go on to associate Venus with their important deity, Kukulkan. Then there are the uncanny symbolic and artistic parallels between Olmec and Maya iconography and ideology. The Mayan feathered serpent motif intertwined snakes and birds, borrowed directly from pervasive Olmec serpent and avian symbols depicting rulership and celestial events. The Maya creation myth describing the world formed from the severed body of a celestial serpent, also mirroring core Olmec symbolism. A major Maya hub like Chichen Itza or Tikal shows advances in architectural design and engineering that can be traced back to the monumental constructions and urban planning feats of the Olmec cities. Using sun, moon, and planetary cycles to orient their pyramids, the Maya stepped pyramids follow the planetary cycles and are an evolution of the Olmec's earlier conical pyramids. Even seemingly unrelated aspects of Maya culture, like their hieroglyphic writing system, elite social stratification, and ritual ball games, can be traced back to Olmec precedents and influences. It's almost as if the Maya started as students or offspring of Olmec civilization before blossoming into their own unique identity. The connections don't stop at just the Maya either. Archaeologists have documented how later great civilizations like the Aztecs, Zapotec, and others ultimately emerged from the same root mother culture template pioneered by the Olmec as well. From commerce and agriculture to spiritual beliefs, so many varied threads seem to weave back to that primordial Olmec foundation. This profound legacy begs deeper questions about how such an advanced fountainhead civilization could could arise in an isolated prehistoric Mesoamerica? Did the Olmec develop their sophisticated knowledge systems entirely through their own ingenuity and by chance? Or might they have inherited kernels of wisdom from an even earlier mother culture, now lost to the mists of time, as controversial thinkers like Graham Hancock have speculated? Renegade thinker Graham Hancock dares to ask, were ancient advanced civilizations like the Olmec sparked by an even older prehistoric global culture? His provocative ideas challenge our understanding of humanity's origins. Don't go anywhere. Graham Hancock's interesting reservations and theories. Of all the daredevil modern explorers and researchers trying to unearth the secrets of lost civilizations, Graham Hancock might be one of the most famous and controversial today. His ideas spark derision from mainstream academics, but also fire up the imaginations of the public, fascinated by alternative interpretations of history. At the core of Hancock's theories lies the belief that a technologically advanced, ancient global civilization once existed on our planet many thousands of years ago, only to be violently interrupted and wiped out by an explosive event. Perhaps a fateful encounter with an extraterrestrial impact like a comet strike, coupled with harsh climate changes and flooding. Hancock thinks that there might have been an ancient civilization that was really advanced, like us today. They had developed sophisticated capabilities rivaling our modern understanding of fields like astronomy, architecture, engineering, and maybe even metaphysics. But then this advanced culture was suddenly wiped out in the space of a cosmic blink, becoming essentially extinct. Hancock suggests that a few scattered pockets of survivors managed to thrive. They traveled to different places with their knowledge. They shared what they knew with other groups of people, helping them become more advanced too. This might have laid the groundwork for new civilizations to start up again later on. So in Hancock's worldview, every major ancient culture that bloomed from roughly 5,000 years ago onward contained at least slivers of inherited knowledge from this precursor mother civilization that achieved towering heights before being wiped away. From the advanced geometry of the Great Pyramids to the bizarre archaeological mysteries of the Nazca Lines or Pumapunku, Hancock sees lingering traces of a lost, archaic episode of brilliant human progress scattered across the globe. Turning our lens back specifically to the ancient Americas and the Olmec in Mesoamerica, Hancock believes they may have been one of the earliest re-civilized societies to emerge in the aftermath of this proposed global disaster. To Hancock's eye, the advanced sophistication of Olmec culture seems too advanced and developed to easily explain as wholly independently achieved from scratch. The Toltecs and Aztecs didn't just inherit the celestial wisdom of the Olmec, they set it ablaze into an apocalyptic inferno of ritual, sacrifice, and obsession. Stay tuned as we explore their dark, fascinating descent. What about the Toltecs and Aztecs? While the ancient Olmec laid the primordial foundations for civilization in Mexico, two later cultures truly built upon that legacy and brought it to soaring new heights: the Toltec and Aztecs. These were the inheritors and torchbearers who took the celestial knowledge and traditions first kindled by the Olmec and set them ablaze into something grander. Emerging around the 10th century AD in the heartlands of central Mexico, the Toltecs were a militaristic civilization based in the city of Tula. Even their name Toltec meant great architects or skilled artisans, which proved incredibly apartment. While less is definitively known about them compared to the Aztecs who followed, the Toltecs have been cited as a crucial bridge between the ancient Olmec influences and the Aztec society that reached its zenith centuries later. Much like the Olmec before them, the Toltecs displayed an advanced understanding of astronomy, constructing their religious centers in meticulous alignment with the movements of the stars and planets. Their capital at Tula was oriented based on precise observations of the sun's motions across the sky. The famous pyramids of the sun and moon there show clear inheritances from the progenitor stepped pyramids pioneered at Olmec sites like La Venta. The Toltecs further inherited iconographies and practices of ancestor veneration, ritualistic bloodletting, and even human sacrifice from Olmec roots. Their sculptures depicting a feathered serpent deity and a cult fascination with Venus overlapped with Olmec iconography, linking back to that mother culture's celestial obsessions. Writings suggest they were keeping extensive records and calendars too, displaying scientific knowledge once thought impossible for their era. So in many ways, the Toltecs can be seen as a crucial connecting bridge, absorbing and synthesizing the profound wisdom first sparked by the Olmec, and then passing it forward to shape the Aztec worldview later on. As Graham Hancock puts it, the later Aztec religion and ideology show clear signs of being a rekindled flame, first lit by the Olmec ancestors, its sacred primordial embers carried forward through that interim Toltec civilization. While the Toltec civilization declined after a few centuries, around 1150 AD, its cultural imprint upon the Aztecs, who rose to dominate Mexico in their wake, cannot be understated. The Aztecs looked to the Toltecs as their spiritual predecessors, in much the same way the Toltecs revered the wisdom of the Olmec before them. It was a continuum of primordial teachings passed down like a sacred fire between the keepers of a deeper, hidden wisdom tradition. If the Toltecs bridged the transition, it was the Aztecs who truly took that ancestral celestial wisdom and ran with it to unprecedented heights across the length and breadth of Mexico. This remarkable civilization dominated from the 14th through 16th centuries, building an immense empire centered around the breathtaking metropolis of Tenochtitlan until its brutal downfall at the hands of the Spanish conquerors. It should come as no surprise that almost every aspect of Aztec religion, science, architecture, and culture contained clear inheritances and influences, harking back to the mother Olmec source code. As if the Olmec DNA persisted through that interim Toltec phase, before reanimating in the Aztecs like a phoenix from the fire. The signature Aztec pyramids followed the same fundamental stepped blueprint of the Olmec and Toltecs. Only the Aztecs took it to even more staggering degrees of scale and precision. Their pyramids aligned to follow the motions of Venus and celestial deities with fanatic accuracy. Just like their Olmec forebears, the Aztecs, it seems, were initiated into the metaphysical mysteries of astrology, astronomy, and advanced mathematics from birth. This knowledge shaped every facet of Aztec culture and beliefs. Their obsession with the rituals of Venus extended into an occult ideology of cycles, from the movements of celestial bodies to the cycles of war and sacrifice needed to replenish and uphold the cosmic order. The ritual artifact known as the Sunstone embodied this cyclical cosmology, directly borrowed from Olmec origins. Many scholars have remarked on how the Aztec spiritual worldview can truly only be understood through the lens of their profound astronomical knowledge, which was inherited across the ages. Then, there were the Aztecs' achievements in agriculture, urban infrastructure, and engineering that seemed to defy the primitive assumptions of their era. They built a sprawling metropolitan island city in Tenochtitlan, with roads, trenches, and grand plazas anchored by towering stone pyramids, all of a scale comparable to major imperial capitals like Rome or Constantinople at the time. The advanced planning, organization, and resources required to stagger the imagination for a society without beasts of burden or the wheel. And like the Olmec, the Aztecs left behind monumental sculptures and artworks of eerie similarity, both in aesthetic styles, as well as archetypal symbolism, and motifs like the feathered serpents and reptilian monsters. It shows that their culture is more than just superficial influences. It is woven with supernatural meanings from the original Olmec culture. One particularly striking connection lies in the bizarre yet persistent commitment by Aztec society to the gruesome ritual practice of human sacrifice taken to unprecedented industrial scales. While the Toltecs and other earlier cultures engaged in sacrifice as well, The Aztecs accelerated this to systematic massacres of tens of thousands ritually murdered per year in some cases. The most chilling part is how the Aztec elite fiercely justified these mass sacrifices as an essential interchange to keep their entire universe from collapsing, to appease the celestial forces and keep humanity afloat in the unceasing cycles of cosmic death and rebirth. While shocking to modern minds, some historians detect eerie echoes of a much older belief system that stretched back to the primordial Olmec roots of Aztec ideology. As controversial author Graham Hancock remarks, even the most horrific, seemingly irrational elements of Aztec society, like their inclination for mass human sacrifice on an industrial scale, start making more sense once you trace it back to inheriting some remnants of an archaic epistemology from the Olmecs. Hancock suggests these were fragments of an occult cosmology and ritual knowledge tradition regarding reincarnating cycles of cosmic death and rebirth that went back much farther into prehistory. Unstoppable for over a millennium, the grand Mesoamerican civilization experiment was violently ended by the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. But did its profound celestial traditions truly die? Keep watching to learn its lingering impact. The fall and legacy of Aztec. In the end, the mighty Aztec empire that had taken the celestial wisdom tradition to such extraordinary extremes eventually fell in 1521 to the Spanish forces of Hernán Cortés. The chronicles tell of how the conquistadors recoiled in disgust at witnessing the extent of Aztec human sacrifice played out in the shadow of those lofty pyramids. Their capital of Tenochtitlan in its day rivaled the greatest cities in the world, boasting floating gardens, elaborate temples, bustling markets, and causeways linking the island precincts. In many ways, echoing the incredible urban planning feats of the ancient Olmec centers like San Lorenzo over a millennium earlier. But after a prolonged siege, hunger, disease, and superior Spanish weaponry brought this imposing civilization swiftly crashing down. With the Aztec downfall, a period of mind-blowing human cultural development in ancient Mesoamerica essentially came to an abrupt close. The continuation of celestial knowledge and traditions, stretching back to the mother Olmec civilization itself, was suddenly severed under the tides of European colonialism and religion. Even today, we can still see the impact of the Olmec Toltec Aztec lineage in modern Mexico and other places. Their pyramids, rituals, symbols, and beliefs are still a part of indigenous communities and traditions. It's like these ancient practices and ideas are still around, even though they started over 3,000 years ago. Some people see this as a special time when ancient cultures were really amazing. Others think it might be a continuation of even older, wiser ways of living. No matter how you see it, it's clear that these ancient civilizations had a huge impact on the world. From the Olmec people who started it all, to the Toltec who carried it on, and the Aztecs who took it to new heights, their traditions have left us with lots of mysteries to think about. It makes us wonder about where ancient human civilizations really came from. This is a dark journey into the Aztecs' blood-soaked obsession with human sacrifice on an industrial scale. This chilling practice hinted at remnants of an archaic ritual epistemology. Let's dive into the madness. The gory rituals of the Aztec civilization. To the Aztecs, sacrifice to the gods through bloodletting was the highest form of religious devotion and a sacred responsibility. They believed that sacrificing humans recharged the sun's celestial movements and prevented the destruction of the world. Without a steady stream of human blood, they thought the sun would stop shining and the universe would come crashing down. Their two chief deities, Huitzilopochtli the sun god and Tlaloc the rain god, required immense amounts of sacrificed blood to remain appeased. For the largest and most important ceremonies, hundreds or even thousands of victims would be ritually killed in a single day through gruesome acts of heart extraction. These mass sacrificial rituals usually took place atop large stepped pyramids in the ceremonial center of the Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan, located in what is now Mexico City. Let us imagine being an eyewitness to one of these macabre events. From early morning, a steady stream of prisoners, slaves, and unlucky captives taken in battle would be force-marched up the steep steps of the towering pyramid under heavy guard by Aztec warriors. The stench of fear hung thick in the air as the condemned climbed higher, hearing the ominous sounds of drums and ceremonial conch trumpets. At the flattened peak of the Great Pyramid stood the sacrificial stone, a large cylindrical carved rock inlaid with a carved face and grooves to allow the blood to drain off. Gathered around it were ranks of senior Aztec priests, face and body painted in terrifying patterns, wearing garments decorated with human skulls. Some carried ropes of human skulls or necklaces made of dried human ears as symbols of status and devotional zeal. As the first prisoners reached the summit, the atmosphere became electric with tension. Soldiers seized the first victim and hastily threw them over the curved sacrificial stone, exposing their abdomen and securing their limbs with leather restraints. The senior priest raised an obsidian knife, catching a glint of sun that enhanced the ominous ritual feeling. With a practiced and swift motion, the knife plunged into the victim's torso just below the rib cage. The priest reached into the gaping wound with both hands and grasped the still beating heart. As he wrenched it from the body, gushes of hot blood sprayed outward over the stone and the sacrificial attendants. The heart was held aloft in dedication to the sun and rain gods, as the limp body was cast from the pyramid down to the immense gathered crowds below. The sickening cycle repeated over and over again for hours. Platoons of strong men stripped the bodies of their wear and hauled them down the steps like cords of wood to be processed later. Meanwhile, more victims were being prepped for sacrifice, sobbing in horror and praying to their own gods for mercy that would never come. As one can imagine, the top of the pyramid became a slaughterhouse scene of almost unimaginable carnage. Rivers of blood flowed in the grooves, pooling in reservoirs at the base. By the end of the ceremonies that could stretch over days of sacrificing, the entire sacrificial stone and pyramid would be utterly drenched and slick with blood from thousands of victims. The extracted hearts were burned in special ceramic bowls as an offering of smoke to the gods. Other body parts, such as heads, may have been displayed on racks or tzompantli skulls for particularly brave sacrificial victims. It was not uncommon for the bodies to be at least partially eaten by the elite Aztec culture in sacred cannibalistic rituals. Even from a young age, children were indoctrinated into these gory rituals. One of the first ceremonies an Aztec youth went through was a rite of passage involving penitential bloodletting. At around age 12 or 13, the children would be lined up and a priest would pass along making small cuts or holes in their bodies using an obsidian knife or spiked maguey leaves. The blood flowing from these wounds was smeared onto pieces of paper that were then burned as an offering to the gods. For adult Aztecs, rituals of self-mutilation and sacrifice were frequent occurrences interwoven into their daily lives. Wealthy nobles and priests engaged in ritual bloodletting, using stingray spines or blades made of bone to pierce their ears, tongues, arms, and genitalia. The philosophy was that the more elite and devout you were, the more you should provide your own blood for the gods. While human sacrifice and bloodletting were certainly practiced by various ancient civilizations, the systematic way the Aztecs ingrained these gory rituals into their everyday culture and identity made it particularly unsettling. What may have started as relatively small sacrificial offerings spiraled completely out of control into widespread ritualistic violence by the time the Spanish arrived in 1519. Contemporary accounts from the Spanish conquistadors describe being utterly horrified by the pyramids drenched in blood, the severed heads on pikes, and the remains of thousands of sacrificial victims strewn about. Ultimately, It was this obsession with human sacrifice that made the Aztecs denounced by their neighbors and allies, sealing their civilization's fate when the Spanish forces were able to conquer the weakened empire. Do you think this archaeological discovery in the Amazon rainforest challenges our understanding of how ancient civilizations developed? Share your thoughts on this mystery in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating videos about humanity's origins and ancient mysteries. Thanks for watching.